All right. Good start of the week. Good Monday. Welcome to Tertuliando en Cuarentena, a space that we venture into, or at least we attempt to try to have a honest conversation with all the anyones and all the everyones that have come along on this over 3 month journey so far. So tonight, depending on whereabouts in the world you might be tuning in from, I have a special friend of mine who is joining us, I believe, and she might be able to correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if she's joining us from Arizona, but let's bring her on board. So let's see if we can make this magic happen. Hello. Hi, Tracy.
Hello.
There we go. Wonderful.
Can you hear me?
So you are at Arizona, am I correct?
Yes, you are correct.
Está bien. Sometimes I usually take the little leap and then I miss, but this time I got it on the correct toe. So
Well, you're talking to a lot of people in sequence, so I imagine that every once in a while it gets mixed up, and
it
that
does
would
get
be
crossed
okay.
over the times and the frames and everything. But Gracia, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the space and the time, and I'm intrigued and I'm very curious as to what this whole conversation will be like. Pero gracias. Thank you.
Es un placer. Muy bien.
So all everyone who's joining in, I always try to make the disclaimer. If you have any questions, any comments, and the particularity of today, you can ask the both in English and Spanish, or I think even in Portuguese. I won't be able to understand it, but I think Trace will be able to understand it. I might chew a little bit, but si tienen pregunta, and you can preguntar en español, it won't be any issue. But we'll sustain this conversation in English. And we like to start things off here talking about the current moment, the current setting that is unfolding and is continually unfolding. I mean, it's been 3 months of this new space, a new frame of reality that happens to bring a lot of things to surface that have been kind of always surrounding us, but they're coming to surface and they're coming to a point that are quite undeniable. So I would like to know. I would like to, if you would like to share a little bit how these last 3 months have been for you, for your family, for your work, and also maybe a little bit of how you've observed socially how these 3 months have been, and share a little bit of that.
Sure. Uh, wow. Yeah. 3 months. Have you done a conversation every day for 3 months?
Nah, I think for the Monday to Friday, and I think maybe from second week of April, perhaps.
Okay.
But it
Okay.
started 20th of March, on and off, 3 days a week, maybe. Yeah, it's been a lot. It's been a lot
Yeah.
of conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. What is time? So I am in quarantine with my partner, Seth Whistleway, who I'm married to. Um, he, him. For those who don't know me, which I assume would be most people watching, my name is Tracy Howe Whistleway. She, her, hers. We have a 10-year-old daughter and two Great Danes. We live in a house in Midtown Tucson. And I already was deployed staff with the national setting of the United Church of Christ. So I worked remotely from home. I have a home office set up and work for the denomination. I'm the minister for congregational and community engagement, and I work at the intersection of community building and the liturgical and kind of spiritual formation life of communities of faith in our denomination, and then the public witness, direct action, and organizing work that happens outside of the buildings and in the communities in which the um, faith communities are in our denomination. I work kind of at that intersection, and my background is as a artist and a cultural worker. And so that's kind of the lens that I bring to it, and very much enjoy that, and then work alongside many of my colleagues. So there's a minister for racial justice and a minister for environmental justice and economic justice, and we have a DC office, and then we have lots of other partner organizations and different communities around the country that are very active in different things. So I was already remote when we started the quarantine, and so I did not have to adjust quite as much in that regard. I also am a songwriter and a music producer, and so I'm in, for those who I can lift up I'll give you, everybody who has visual abilities, I'll give you a little tour of my office here. I'm sitting in the chair, and here's my office, and then I have my console there, and there's my yoga mat on the floor and
there are
my
your
curtains,
feet.
because I have way too many Zoom calls, and behind the curtains there's like all my stuff on shelves.
It's good. You got alternate the background.
Yeah. So it's a finished garage is my workspace.
That was well done. Good job.
So yeah, and so the biggest shift for us was, but I did travel quite a bit. I worked.
Mhm.
I would have to travel to work with colleagues at our national office, which is based in Cleveland, and then travel to different events that were happening in different parts of the country, and then just wherever things were happening or communities I was supporting or engaging or whatnot. And then the same was true with music. And then, so the not traveling part has changed, obviously, and then the homeschooling has changed. So my daughter not being in school, she's 10. And my partner is also a minister and an activist, and so he's the interim minister, kind of strategic consultant for a community of faith and transition right now, is what that means here in Tucson, and continuing just a lot of work related to the ongoing story in Charlottesville, where we lived and organized for 6 years prior to coming here. So he has a little home office here, but we as far as setups go, we have a pretty sweet setup, but it's still, it's a lot in that you're on top of each other, and it's a lot that you're isolated, and
Claro.
it's a lot. But I also, I have a personality that thrives more in isolation. And so I feel more for people. I do miss, though, going out and just people watching, even though I don't mind, being by myself and having time to think or have independence. I definitely miss just community engagement and places to gather. That's still a grieving part of it, for sure. And I released my latest single, Build the World, I guess, maybe a month and a half ago now. And I had started recording that in the studio right as the pandemic was breaking out. Actually, my brother, and his partner, they are expat teachers in China, and they had already been evacuated at the start of everything.
Wow.
We were kind of watching it from afar, and they were staying with us before, we knew all of these things. So I'm really, really grateful that I got the chance to get that done and release it into the world at a time when I feel like a lot of people just need a little bit more to hold on to. Yeah, I'll stop there just because that's really the internal family life. I mean, then there's layers upon layers upon layers.
Claro,
There's
claro,
what I'm
claro.
working on in work, and there's music, and then there's the, the uprising and the latest iteration of the movement made visible in the streets and all these kinds of things. So that's all
I
pretty
love
cool things
it.
happening
And throughout the
going on.
conversation, maybe here and
Sure.
there, those things will spurt more maybe organically, naturally as the conversation goes on. So that's perfectly fine. Um, Another thing I like to give the opportunity of those joining me here is to share a little bit about going back in retrospect in their life, that they can share instances or moments or processes that they feel are memorable enough that they can remember those moments, instances, or processes had to do significantly with the way that you have kind of with the way you are right now, like shaping moments, cathartic moments, every like w- within life, throughout life, in lo cotidiano, even in the ordinary things that
Mhm.
I used quote unquote ordinary, we put those labels on them. Everything has to do with the way we change. Everything has to do with the way we are, whether we realize it or not. But I guess this question goes into what things are you conscious of, or what things are you, what are those exclamation mark moments, perhaps, and it could be exclamation marks in silence, but moments that are very memorable in your life and you feel are part of that evolution journey that you've been through. And I really like hearing these stories because everyone has very particular stories, and I think I love stories. I like hearing stories. Um, so yeah, if you could share at least three, you can share
Mhm.
more. They could go date back as when you were a little girl to as recent as 2 hours ago. So feel free.
Sure, sure. Yeah. Uh, so one one story that has become important to me in um, recognizing what has shaped me and recognizing the work that I need to do uh, to cultivate my humanity and work on my own freedom and liberation, and also just be a force of of that in the world
Hmm.
is is a memory I have as a child sitting at the dinner table with my father, um, who my father was born in the Philippines and lived there till he was 13. And he he found security in uh, kind of the mythology of the nation state of the United States and what I would call proximity to whiteness.
Hmm.
And he very much loves us and cared for us. But I remember very specifically as a child being told, be really glad that you were born white and in America.
Hmm.
And I grew up, in the um, ancestral lands of the Cheyenne and Arapaho people. This is what I say now because I'm working really hard to live into a story that demonstrates living relationships with um, with people. Um, Spirituality, I would submit, is the demonstration of living relationships.
Hmm.
And so the depth of our spirituality is the depth to which we can demonstrate living relationships. So I can start and I can demonstrate a living relationship with me, and I start eating healthy food and cultivate a garden and become conscious about eco things, and um, then I can cultivate. I can have awareness of food chain and realize that this food, the way that it was cultivated, and start demonstrating living relationships with everyone from from the earth that it was cultivated in and to every person that touched it.
Mm-hmm.
But then, I think to demonstrate living relationships with ancestors and future generations, that's something that uh, when I witness people who just walk in it, that's just a living reality that they live in. That's a powerful thing. I mean, people that live just demonstrating living relationships, they live in a certain way that does not make sense to the world we have constructed with neoliberal capitalism. you
Claro.
know?
It could be very
And they
threatening.
seem so free,
Yeah.
because they are also held in these living relationships by these living relationships, because if you're demonstrating it, you're also a part of it. You're sustained by it.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I say that because I when I say it's not, to me, it's more than a land acknowledgement. It's I'm living into a story that these are people that we're connected to, and I'm trying to understand, and how I demonstrate this living relationship that exists and always has. Um, and I'm just beginning that journey. So anyway, I grew up in this ancestral land of the Cheyenne and Arapaho people that's now called Boulder, Colorado, that is now what I would call almost completely colonized.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I mean, it's very white.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really fun place to be if you are a white bodied person, or even if you're just visiting for a while and you're just like popping in. And it's hard to know, like, because I grew up and I loved it, and I loved the access to the wilderness, and it is just geographically just some of the most stunning area in the world. I love it so much, and I had such fond memories, and yet I had to deconstruct so much to find who I was because I grew up in that place. So anyway, the dinner table conversation, but also related to just growing up in a very heavily colonized area. And so I recognize now I'm a mixed race person who presents white and was socialized white, and therefore I have access to the power and the privilege of the empire, and I need to do the work of a white person because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I don't do that, then I can unintentionally wield that violence against people with brown and black bodies, a la Amy Cooper, or much worse, But I have all these parts in me, it's very entangled. Another story would be in Bolivia. Um, After I graduated college and I studied religion and music composition, and I had wanted very badly to have the opportunity to study abroad in some like very mountainous, adventurous region of the world, like Nepal or Bolivia, the Andes or the Himalayas or something like that. That was kind of, this adventure kind of thing in me, born again out of kind of this Western ideal of what
Mm-hmm.
adventure was, but still also drawn out of this very real desire to understand humanity and understand the world and understand people. Like I at that point in time, I wasn't drawn to. I didn't really want to go and see area, Europe and Australia. Like I wanted to go and see places where the earth seemed more accessible, and and I so I graduated early because I was putting myself through school. So I just did it, and then did a year of service volunteer work, that a lot of people do, and then was able to go to Latin America that way. And it was like a youth ministry kind of volunteer service corps
Mm-hmm.
thing. And I was placed on a team with other people, and we traveled through the U.S.-Mexico borderlands in Peru and Bolivia. And we did like youth and family ministry camps and cross-cultural education stuff. Um, and we visited we visited a ton of prisons in all of those places, which also blew my mind. But that's not the story that I want to say. I in Bolivia, though, in learning about the history, excuse me, um, I learned that that country had had land taken away. I mean, first of all, it was totally colonized, but also that that country in particular was the poorest in Latin America. It was half full-blood indigenous and had had land taken away on all four sides or on all sides, and so it no longer had access to the ocean. And so there was this kind of, I don't want to say it didn't feel like weakness to me, because the people I witnessed were not weak. It was this kind of this humility. Uh, it was like this dignity that others were not recognizing. Um, but also that I understood that I would never have part of, because I was not Bolivian. It was
Hmm.
like I understood for the first time that I was not essentially that I was a colonizer. I learned I was a colonizer before I was white, is how I would say it now. But that I could not ever understand that um, from my place of privilege, from my place of being born into the empire, from my place of being a visitor, from so many things,
Hmm.
and that kind of shook me, because it started to shake, and I had to start critiquing power in my relationships and how I approached things. I had a lot of conversion experiences, after that. I think there were some driving questions that drew me into spaces continuously. And one of those, we met in one of those spaces, but I was always wanting to know that transforming love was real. Um, this was always a driving and kind of a selfish question. Like, I didn't set out to be this like activist or someone who would like change the world and do good. I actually selfishly really wanted to know that this existed for real.
Hmm.
That if that something could could actually change injustice to justice, horrific things to beautiful things, death to life. Like, I wanted to know that this was real. And the thing that made sense for me to pursue that question was to pursue essentially um, going into places where there places that had been marginalized, or violence or suffering were taking place. Um, and um, part of that was informed by, I mean, my growing formation as a Christian, and just a very fundamentalist reading of Matthew 13 and a fundamentalist reading of the Beatitudes. So I just literally went to prisons and literally went to places, and uh, I had a lot of naiveness in me at times, and I had a lot of idealism, and I had a lot of unchecked privilege, and I had a lot of uh, you know a lot of baggage wrapped up being a child of the empire, socialized white. But the movement of liberating love is real, is what I found over and over. Because the spirit of the spirit of what I would say, the spirit of life, or the spirit of living love, or the spirit of this liberating force, you know, the fruits of the presence of that
Mm-hmm.
are objective. You can see them,
Mm-hmm.
you can point to them, you can identify them. Beauty and peace and gentleness and yeah, kindness, creativity, community. I mean, so I would be in the midst of like really hard situations or be witnessing something really hard, rather be blessed to witness, be invited into a community, be given access. Um, Often because I was an artist, because art creates pathways,
Mm-hmm.
and then I would be blessed to witness this at work, like communities struggling with horrific trial, and yet this objective fruit of the spirit of life. And this objective fruit then is both, it's both the fruit of, and then like also the catalyst for more transformation and change. And so I started to get free and started um, to grow and change, and then had a lot more conversion experiences along the way. So, you know, traveling with Brian for a year, and then which is where we met.
Mm-hmm.
But then, another huge conversion experience for me. I had conversion experiences along the border, which I have settler roots to this land. My maternal grandparents are buried here, and my mother died here. But I also did a lot of work as an artist and an activist here before we moved here about a year ago now. Um, but I also had a huge conversion experience in Ferguson after Mike Brown died, being invited there, and then lived in Charlottesville, which became, this um, growing opportunity that, maybe we didn't want, but now here we are, and so many people I see uh, who were forged in that fire are now the future hope of the world. Young people that really led us in that and are still going strong. Oh my goodness. So yeah.
I think that it is um, it is of particular interest of mine to maybe at some point, whenever I might find myself pursuing a thesis or whatnot, maybe channel it down these venues of the the particularity of understanding or attempting to understand those very specific, and it links to the question, no? Those very specific moments that scratch maybe scratch deeper into oneself to the point that will inconvenience us to such a level that it'll be the causation, or it'll be the causing of very tangible change. um and I'm curious to know, because a good you know a good amount of people that have come through Tertuliando that have more or less similar backgrounds as we do in terms of the evangelical, coming up in that environment, have had moments of kind of like shedding feathers.
Hmm.
And this is just a very human thing. This is
Sure.
not exclusive to that, but my observation is within this frame, no, gente en el mundo evangélico. And I'm curious if you like, especially taking into account everything that's going on now, and then you're referencing Ferguson, which to me seems ages ago. I mean, it's and I think that has to do with the whole this speed of how things go by, or not necessarily how things go by, but how things are projected though as they go by.
Hmm.
Um, Something is newsworthy one day, and then the next day it's dissolved. Um, and in that context, as if things have changed and rapidly progressed, I'm wondering if within that specific, maybe post Ferguson, if you've had particular instances or particular moments where have really discomforted you to the core, or have been really that as we sometimes refer to some moments in our life as processes. So has any of these, because we're talking about less than 5 years ago and forward, moments that have been just very, that has dislocated your spiritual shoulder, like have been just really uncomfortable, if you have any um anything, because
Hmm.
because changing is not changing can be easy, but it can also be hard when it's like really um inconveniencing, and it doesn't necessarily mean inconveniencing to the eyes of others, but maybe just deep down inside you realize there's some um uncomfort zoning that is happening. I don't know if you, and and also as you've become a minister, or ordained, I don't know what the proper terminology might be, but as you're venturing into that, as you relate into it, has there been something that is significant enough that you can remember that is like, I mean, because you go way back to when you were a kid having that conversation with God, but as of recent years and this, because I know this is time that could be very, I'm trying to pick the correct word or the most accurate word, because inconveniencing I think it falls short, but like that usually sometimes the result for some people is denial, or like how we say in Puerto
Unraveling.
Rico, like pichal. You might hear it in reggaeton, like to ignore things and to be like to act as though. And I don't know if you've encountered yourself with enough maybe moments of that you realize that you can't ignore it, and you can't ignore it anymore, or you didn't know you were ignoring, or um,
I don't know if this is what you're talking about, but like there's there's a there's a limit to just self-reflection um, when it comes to getting free from the construct of race as a white embodied person. Because, like Ruth Gilmore, her definition of racism is let me get it wrong, so I'll look it up.
can you mention the name again?
Ruth Gilmore is the state sanctioned or extra legal production and exploitation of group differentiated vulnerability to premature death. So I'll say that again. Racism is the state-sanctioned or extra-legal production of exploitation
Mm.
of group-differentiated vulnerability to premature death.
Sí, está fuerte eso, ¿eh?
So there's a great awakening happening right now with the what my dear friend and we call him a movement elder and teacher, but also a dear friend, an artist, Rev Sekou. He he's calling this latest iteration, the George Floyd uprising.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really the latest iteration of the movement made visible in the street of what is a 7-year movement of Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter, vale.
There is a historic awakening. We've never had anything, like it doesn't matter where on the political spectrum it falls, there has never been anything that has had such a refined gathering and forging of support around in history, that's been measured at least, like Black Lives Matter, as there has been in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. And but with that, there comes what, then how shall we live, and what does this mean? And when you talk about being shaken, what I imagine is, there's a cost. And so at what point do you let it cost you something? Do you let it change you? And for me, what that has meant is stepping into movements of liberation is part of the process of getting free is once you're entangled, your stakes are actually entangled with the liberation of your fellow siblings. And so, we saw this in Charlottesville, for example, when you are being prosecuted because you're an anti-racist activist who is working alongside Black anti-racist activists, it's not the same. You don't face the same persecution day by day and the generational trauma that people in Black bodies do, but you have entangled your future security with the well-being of your siblings, and that entanglement, I think, offers us hope. Because if we limit our awakening to just internal reflection to, I want to understand more about racism, we're not entangling our future in that. I think, part of that's happening right now, I guess, with the monuments coming down. Charlottesville started because Ziana Bryant, who was only a sophomore in high school at the time when she wrote an open letter to the community, saying that having white supremacist participation trophies in the center of the city made her feel like did not make her feel safe, and needed to be addressed, and started then what became, that was in 2016, and then there was organizing, in the year prior to what became the now well-known summer of 2017 in Charlottesville, leading up to the Unite the Right rally in August of 2017. And now what's happening with monuments everywhere is it's this great reckoning of what history what history is marked upon and what we need to remember. And then we had the land protectors and the treaty. I think they were going by land protectors um, up the Lakota, the Siksika land protectors around, you know, what we call Mount Rushmore. You
Hmm.
know, when what's his face was going to give the speech, because there's a treaty that is not being recognized, and they were trying to enforce the latest treaty, you know, and prevent that from happening. And once we start going towards this reckoning, which I'm very excited about, people who have had the access to the power and privilege of the empire, who start to let go, are going to have to let go and see what this means. And, for me, doing the land acknowledgement is the bare minimum.
Hmm.
But I truly believe that we belong to one another. And that doesn't mean like, oh, my siblings, you belong to me, and so I have to help take care of you. That means that I belong to them.
And they care for you too.
And so
Yeah.
if we're having this big reckoning and the land returns and my house is like in something, it's now called Midtown Tucson, who knows what it'll be called,
Hmm.
and all that goes out the window. Like I need to, like the future is unknown, and history, like what we think of as like history is about this big, like in
Yeah,
the
in the
grand
big
scheme
frame.
of
Yeah.
things. And so I'm kind of reflecting on these things right now, just how I've rooted my senses of security, and all of these kinds of things, and what I'm celebrating even in the movement now. Like if I push that forward, what that really would mean in the story that I'm currently living in, and where I'm demonstrating my security by the choices that I've made. So yeah, it's all vulnerable and powerful, and it's the beauty and kind of the terrifying nature of it all.
In spaces that you find yourself in, like within a Christian body, a Christian expression of faith, which are which are spaces that in certain times and still to today have represented a threat, even now as we speak about the land and the essence of the land, and those who harvested the land even before the white man came to do its own version of harvesting, um, to put it nicely. And how do you how do you stay woke? How do you stay within that space that has been a token or has been a green card for colonization, or a golden ticket, as the pre-chorusing excuse to, hey native, hey indigenous, hey Tainos, like in Puerto Rico, we come to bring you the truth. So and I think I was having a conversation, maybe it touched a little bit about this with a friend of mine, or I think it was an exchange in a thread, kind of like trying to figure out you know, what religion means, and religion is a big, large body, which Christianity is part of. Um, and what does that mean? It's like, oh, would Jesus have gotten to this part of the world if it wouldn't have been for these colonizers? And I mean, I'll share a little bit of my thought about it, and maybe a little bit as a teacher, as I'm constantly with kids, and I wonder, and I see kids and their innate in their innate way of being and their innate lacking of inhibitions, and they just go out and go out about their business and they have fun. And I think about whether they're whether they're needing or requiring a certain narrative or the specificity of a narrative to be.
Mhm.
And it made me wonder. I'm like, well, I wonder what my Taínos would have been without this entering of Jesus, whatnot. So being part, being part of that, and also being an authority in that too. As you have your certain rank or whatnot. How do you stay grounded with, or how do you do maybe a balancing act of not allowing, maybe the paternalism or el discurso paternalista that has been maybe a part of that, and like you said before, the reading of the beatitudes maybe in a certain way. How do you keep the colonizing discourse at bay that has defined greatly a great part of Christianity? So how do you keep that locomotive engine running always to continually problematize, um eso?
Sure, sure. That's a great question. Uh, so, as far as being ordained in the United Church of Christ, a large part of that decision was me wanting to locate myself within the continuum of Christianities, uh, and locate myself theologically in a place, um, saying, yes, I do claim this, this faith of, Christianity and Jesus, but theologically, it's rooted in a very a much more generous theology and open and affirming um, stance, and a still speaking like very dialectic. We are taking science seriously kind of
Mm-hmm.
position. So that's a large part of why I came to the United Church of Christ, and is wanting to locate myself as I continue the work of collaboration, wanting people to know, like locate myself and branch out from that place. Um, Christianity and understanding Creator and Jesus and Spirit to me has become much more about what it means to be human, um, than anything else. And um, that is kind of like the inverse of evangelicalism. Evangelicalism kind of pulled me the other way.
Mm-hmm.
And now my faith pulls me completely towards my humanity. And when I find encounters of spirit, even though it's always looking towards how is this making me more human, how is this helping me demonstrate a living relationship with with myself and future generations, and all these things. And I find that question, when it's alive in other religions and faiths, is the most powerful meeting point.
Mm-hmm.
So that has been a shift. That's been a big shift over for me over the years. As far as being someone, I think locating myself constantly is key, and being open-handed. It's a lot like being someone, a white passing person in the room. Like locating yourself constantly is creating space to be connected in the story and not colonizing. So you don't walk into the space making the assumptions of all the things.
Hmm.
And when there's been previous trauma, you even do the extra work you know, to say the extra things like, oh, and by the way, queers are holy.
Yeah, even take
You know, all the extra things. But in terms of theological, inside the church, there are theologians even in the UCC who are doing work on multiple religious belongings, trying to do, actually seeing it as part of the Christian call and reparative work of colonization to support the reconstruction and the flourishing of African traditional religions and native religions as the actual reparative work, to be a faithful Christian, to
Vale.
do reparative work to make sure these religions flourish.
Yeah.
And that's been a big part of it. And then the other part is just continuing to lift up and support and create pathways for support for Native expressions and BIPOC expressions and decolonizing expressions of faith and even not faith, decolonizing forces in the world, I would
Claro.
say, are really important.
Tú, y te voy a hacer esta pregunta en español, porque tiene que ver con la comunidad latinoamericana. ¿Cómo tú entiendes tu envolvimiento, ¿no? con la comunidad latinoamericana te ha afectado a ti en tu visión espiritual y también en tu arte, en cómo tú manifiestas la música, porque también tú expresas algunas canciones en español. So, me gustaría que expresara un poquito de cómo te ha afectado a ti como persona en esas áreas, el desenvolverte un poco en comunidades latinoamericanas, como dije, en tu arte, ¿no? Y en tu óptica de la espiritualidad. Es como quien diría, ¿qué lecciones de vida, podríamos decir, qué lecciones de vida te ha dado envolverte en comunidades latinoamericanas?
Bueno, puedo comenzar en español, pero
Como tú quieras, tú te puedes contestar en inglés.
Llegaré
No
al
te
punto
preocupes.
y cambiaré.
So just a little bit in case people understand. I basically asked Tracy if just her involvement in the Latin American communities, how has that affected her as far as spirituality, her art, and just what lessons of life has that brought upon her life journey,
For sure.
more or less.
Yeah. So, bueno, gracias por la pregunta. This is really important, and I don't get to share this a lot because I'm not often asked. Two things immediately come to mind. The first is that early on as an artist, I understood different socioeconomic models and realities. You know, I toured in the early 2000s, like 2000 to 2010, and Patreon did not exist. Had Patreon existed, I probably would not have founded a nonprofit. But I needed the infrastructure. And I saw that, you know, my friends in Latin America had a completely different socioeconomic reality. And I was trying to figure out and really struggle with the power and my access to wealth, even as a starving artist in the United States. You know, I knew where to turn or what college to book to get a paycheck, and yet still felt called to play in the prison. Still wanted to collaborate with the community, you know, in southern Brazil or whatever. And I'm very grateful for Restoration Village Arts and the infrastructure that we were able to use, because then it grew into something that's been helpful for others. but that definitely, I'm just very glad that I early on saw modeled to me um, communities of artistry and communities that valued artistry and yet completely different socioeconomic realities that really made me question ways of doing things. And I so doing house concerts, partnering with communities in radically different ways, um, doing different combinations of, you know, pay what you want and articulating, you know, and just when people would book me, articulating, well, this is a living wage, but this is, you know, how I can partner with you if it's not accessible. You know, this just different things
Hmm.
was really helpful. The other, spiritually, has been invaluable, and that is that I saw communities. Really, it's anarchist theory, and I really have struggled with the way that people have thrown around anarchism as a critique, like just kind of carelessly throwing it around, like looters and anarchists. I'm like,
See,
anarchy is actually a very hard thing to pull off.
see, but they have been able to pull it off apparently.
um, but at its core, you know, I would see communities in Latin America who, you know, either governments, you know, were beyond. I mean, the systems were not working for the poor. The systems were not there, and there was no hope that they ever would.
Hmm. Claro.
Um, and um, you know, police were not only killing people; they were just really just other armed actors in the communities threatening people. Just really hard situations. And so what I saw over and over again was communities just building community, building new systems of transportation and care, really mutual aid systems, you know, little mutual aid systems all over Latin America and communities and, you know, within church structures or within neighborhoods. Um, to care for one another, to keep people safe, to make sure people are accounted for, to make sure children grow up well, to make sure people have what they need, and to do that in spite of whatever circumstance exists, be it a government or a militia or a gang or poverty or whatever. Um, I saw this over and over and over. And so when people come and they talk to me and I talk about community building, and I see here some of the most hopeful things in this country that I see are the subverting of any kind of systems that we're trying to transform,
Hmm.
and just the creation of something that creates a thriving community, you know, um, be it alternative food economies in Baltimore for Black neighborhoods, or um, or in Chicago, or anything. Those kinds of things, I think, are hopeful because I will continue fighting for a different world, and the world that I want to live in, and the world that I want, you know, our children to live in, and working alongside and listening to the visions of uh, the people, you know, the people that are rising up right now, and listening to their beautiful visions of the world. Um, but I also have learned over and over again that you can actually build it now in small, at least in small parts, at least like you can plant a garden
Hmm.
in that variation. And I've seen that and learned that and witnessed that over and over again in Latin America.
What what artists uh, in this Spanish, Portuguese, English speaking world uh, do you find yourself going to? to find inspiration, perhaps? Like, and this is a question that could, go. It could. I'm thinking of music, but it doesn't have to limit itself in music. Um, Places you find yourself going. By places, I mean, like, people, estos espacios, um, and that you might intentionally, because sometimes we just need those little spaces, and then there's some comforting voices that we go to. Um, so if you could share maybe one or two, or lo que quiera, no? Of voices or hands, or um, that you unfailingly perhaps go to, and that maybe have also influenced you musically, este, just visionaries, the way you're looking into the world, they have definitely sown a seed. So no sé qué artistas tú buscas y como que casi no fallan, de que cuando los escuchas o te dan algo.
Sure. Bueno, the héroes de la cultura, like Mercedes Sosa,
Mercedes Sosa, excelente.
Montesino, um, Ernesto Cardenal. I got to host a house concert for his niece, Katia Cardenal, who's
Oh, wow.
Nicaraguense. She traveled all over the world, but she's kind of in a later season of life. But she, you know, had a few friends in Tucson, and ended up being able to host a little house concert here, which was very, very sweet. I I love music that comes out of Puerto Rico, man. I love.
No sé, algunas voces en particular que te gustan,
Oh my gosh. I mean, cállate.
o sea, aparte de Ricky Martin.
Well, I do like Ricky Martin, but
No, yo no. ¿Quién no? ¿Quién no?
Angelica Negron. I love. I mean, all of your friends I love, but I also
Sí.
love like the more well known stuff. Okay,
Residente, sí, sí, claro.
but I think, in Puerto Rico, the mix of just the kind of the colonial, the Latin American, like the deeply Latin American identity, but then you also have like Boricua and this like you're still like, we're being colonized right now, and also this like there's just such like this intersection there that I find the lyrics and the sound, like whatever comes out of Puerto Rico, I think is pretty unique, and I tend to enjoy it quite a bit. I also love like the really smooth sounds like cantautores that come out of like Colombia.
Claro.
Yeah. I like Juana Molina. Juana Molina was like a favorite of mine and really influenced. I'm not a songwriter like her, but I studied how she composed and just loved what she was making, and it exposed me to then this whole Argentinian world of electroacoustic composers, and that was really great. Anita Tijoux, I love. Yeah, kind of just a wealth of artists and music. I also just love the way that Latin American artists support one another, or that I have observed at least. So
una pregunta más o menos en esa línea, a question kind of like in that line too. If you could have a chance to collaborate with an artist, puede ser en Latinoamérica, donde sea en el mundo, ¿no? Doesn't have to be in Latin America. Esto es un preguntón de preguntón, porque it's a loaded. I pick just one. Pero ¿qué artista te interesaría, te resultaría, would be very interesting, and it could just be a completely a completely curious reason, like you just, it's just you're curious enough to see how this person might work. Uh, and it could be someone. It could be someone who's dead as well. I mean, just this is someone from the past or now that you think would be so intriguing that if you had the chance to collaborate with, it'd be como un sueño cumplido.
That's funny. That's a great question. Wow.
Solo una persona, no puedes coger dos, una nada más.
Una persona.
O una
Una
banda.
persona.
Como único puede ser más de
I
una es que
mean,
sea una
I
banda.
would choose Nina Simone just because I would want to meet her. But I mean, she's super
Nina Simone?
intense. Nina Simone, yeah, she'd
Yeah.
be really intense. Just because I would want to like sit in her presence, and I mean, I'd be like, I would like probably like dust the piano lid. That would be like the extent of our collaboration, because I don't have chops that would hang with Nina Simone.
Yeah. I mean, she seems
But
very interesting.
But that's who I would love to
No,
witness.
it seems very intriguing. Seems very intriguing. I mean, I saw her documentary and let me a lot of question marks. It's very. She seems like a very mysterious human being. Like there's just a lot, definitely a lot going on. That kind of goes into artists, like
Yeah.
más o menos definiendo. But mira, to kind of like start landing and ir aterrizando en esta tertulia. Algo que me gusta preguntarle a mis invitados, something I like to ask the people. You see how I just gone completely Spanglish right now? Este is kind of like you looking at your life as a whole, and you're probably gonna have to require a little bit of imaginación, no? Because your life it's not over. But what would you say? I mean, I guess until this point, and maybe use your imagination a little bit, what would you say are things of tremendous value that you would like those behind you, in the sense that those that once you leave this world experience, that you would like for them to remember you by? And this is a very classic question. I mean, this question gets thrown around, but with real things, not like if you if you can not if you can establish a script and be like, well, I would definitely like, even if it's not true, but like of real things that they could be like, nah, she's bullshitting us, like but like like real things that you felt were valuable learning lessons or
Yeah.
yeah.
So the single that I just released, "Build the World," and there's a video. My website is tracyhowemusic.com, TracyHowe music.com. So "Build the World" was kind of that. It was kind of at the end. I released a full length album last year called "Things That Grow," and in it I had a lot of those songs came out of the movement work that I had done over the last number of years. The song "Bury Me," which I wrote and then became kind of an anthem for Charlottesville, and my friend, who's also an artist, Asaji Fuseku, kind of took it to this whole other level, which as a songwriter is really exciting for me. But just kind of reflecting, there's also a lot of trauma. We've been through a lot of trauma as well.
Claro.
And are old enough to know that nothing's guaranteed. Mm-hmm. And even now, I mean, not to be morbid, but to be very real. I mean, we have a daughter, we have a 10-year-old daughter. And so we have like our end of life plans. We know who she goes to should something happen. And we revisited that when the pandemic started.
Mhm.
And so, we're hearing these stories like it hits, and some people are gone in a week. And we just wanted to make sure that that was intentional and that things would be taken care of. And I think part of the mythology of this empire and nation state, and also of whiteness, is hey, you can be whatever you want to be, just be whatever you want to be. And
Mm.
that actually is really destructive. There's a whole lot of things that you really shouldn't be. that would be really
Definitivo.
horrible if you would be those things. Don't be, don't be horrible things. That the
Claro.
much better question is, what is the world you want to live in? And build that world. And so part of my practice and my mantra has become, and even daily and with my relationships, like be it with my in-laws or in my neighborhood, is like building the world that I want to live in. And that's the piece that I would hope would be left behind. And that's certainly not this wisdom that I came up with. That's something that I've cultivated because a lot of amazing people I've been blessed to connect with and learn from. And in the song, I talk about just specific ways that I've seen that unfold. But we have to build the world we want to live in, and we have to deal with the reality that is now. This is what we have to build with now. We don't have like the pristine, in a vacuum thing. We have the
Claro.
reality that is now, which is a super colonized world, totally overrun with militarization and globalized capitalism. And yet, beauty's possible. And there is, this powerful living spirit that is that is witnessed because I can see the objective fruit in the world in the wake of her presence. So that's what I would hope. And I would love to make a lot of money on my song before I die, but if I make a lot of money posthumously, then I hope it goes to a really good cause.
Vale. Eso es bueno dejarlo claro. That's good that you leave that, quite straight up and clear. Speaking about, posthumously and what can be of it. Bueno dejar esos detalles claro. So, Tracy, gracias. Thanks so much for sharing a little bit with us. Y yo lo aprecio mucho. And I definitely, I value our intermittent connected friendship that goes back 12 years ago. And los momentos que estamos y hemos intercambiado, por lo general son momentos muy, muy interesantes. And I get something from it. And everyone has been in a different place in time, and we can see that constant evolution, that constant change. Because, like Dylan said, the times are changing. It's not a myth. The times are changing. They're quite the same in some many aspects, but they are changing, and also change has to do with our kind of like, I guess, our eyes become a little bit less cloudy if we allow it to. So muchas gracias. I te deseo súper lo mejor, and I hope that that in this realities that we're exploring, that we never go back to normal. We never go back to that. I hope that new worlds are possible, and that this could kind of break through to that. So, un abrazo a ti, a Seth, a tu familia, a tus grandiosos perros que no los he conocido, que son grandiosos porque son grandes. Y nada, gracias.
Un placer, ha sido un gran placer. Un abrazo a ti y a todos que han venido con nosotros. Ha sido un tiempo muy especial.
So, gente, gracias por lo que estuvieron. Y yo siempre cierro con estas palabras, close with these words that are actually going to be quite tangible for the people that don't know who I refer to every time I close. Is very famous, known astrologer from Puerto Rico, and the Latin American country knows him quite well, Walter Mercado. And not tomorrow, but on Wednesday, there's going to be a documentary on his life. And every time he closed his segment, he would always say, les deseo que tenga mucha paz, pero mucho, que mucho amor. So hasta la próxima, amigos y amigas. Chao, chao.